Where Trump's strength is, why he leads Biden, it's voters who don't typically turn out in many elections. Didn't vote in 20, didn't vote in 2022. They are with Trump by more than 20 points.
The current narrative from the Democrats and therefore the mainstream media is that Joe Biden, of course, is surging in the polls. He's got this big bump coming out of his State of the Union address. So, of course, he's showing how strong of a leader he is, how popular all of his policies are. But, of course, that's not necessarily true. So the first thing I want to do is jump into some discussion on new polling with younger voters over on CNN, which, of course, is not looking good for old Joe.
How much has sort of the potential youth vote changed because of the Israel-Hamas war? And I'm assuming that it is Joe Biden who they are going after.
Yeah, Sarah. You know, this is one of those cases where I feel like the conventional wisdom has got ahead of what the actual numbers are telling us. So, you know, you go back, young voters, Biden versus Trump margin. You look at the final 2020 polls. You saw Biden won these voters by 29 points. You look at the last month, 2024 polls, you see they're only favoring Biden by about 5 percentage points. You go, my goodness gracious, 29-5. That's a huge shift. Gaza and Israel has made a major impact on the election. Here's the thing. Young voters were beginning to turn on Joe Biden before any of this conflict, of the recent conflict in the Middle East, started anyway. So the pre-Israel-Hamas war numbers, if you look at the 2024 polls, Biden was only favored by 11 points. So we already saw an 18-point shift away from him. Yes, there has been a little bit of a degradation in his numbers, but the fact of the matter is most of the shift away from Biden was already happening before the recent war started on October 7th.
So how has this war affected voters overall, not just the young vote, but just overarching?
Right. You know, we've been focusing in so much on young voters and these campus protests. Of course, keep in mind, they're not that large a percentage in the electorate, which we'll get to in a second. Look at all voters, the Biden versus Trump margin. Pre the Israel-Hamas war, look at this. We had a tie. We had a tie, which, of course, is a worse position than Joe Biden was 4 years ago when he won the election by 4.5 points. But it was already a tie. Look at the recent 2024 polls. It was also a tie. So the fact is we have not seen that type of shift that we would be expecting. And, Sarah, I will just note, you know, we're talking about these student voters. The share of the adult citizen population university or college students make up, it's only 6 to 8%, Sarah. It's not a large chunk. And if you look at those that are currently at a private school like Columbia or NYU, they're only 1 to 2%. They have a very small portion.
Okay, so despite Joe Biden losing 24% support among younger voters, this is not tied to the whole Israel-Hamas conflict, okay? This is just all of them leaving Joe Biden in droves well before that. I'm not sure if he meant to say that part out loud, but yes, apparently it's just Joe Biden's policies. Who Joe Biden is, that is what is driving away the youth vote, not necessarily his stances on Israel and Hamas, okay? But that, of course, is mentioned when he talks about the people attending college, right? It's really just a very small percentage of those crazy left-wingers out there threatening to pull their support from Joe Biden. So they don't really matter. They're totally inconsequential, despite the fact that every other election, they're always like, oh, the youth vote is all that really matters. That's all we care about. So yes, Donald Trump, of course, has made huge gains among all of these demographics, as we have pointed out several times in the past. But of course, it's not just CNN sounding the alarm. We also have something very similar from NBC. Let's check this out.
Absolutely, Chris. And I think the biggest headline let's give you the bottom line. Donald Trump does lead Joe Biden 46 to 44% in our poll, but this is a tightening from our last poll. You could see 3 months ago, Donald Trump had a 5-point lead against the current president. That 5-point lead now down to 2 points. So there is progress here for Biden in the last 3 months.
Coming after the State of the Union, and he's had a campaign blitz.
Yeah, he's in the Democratic primaries, such as they were, coming to an end. Perhaps there's Democrats rallying around Biden, too. Also, I think not coincidentally, this slight improvement here for Biden tracks with a slight improvement in his job approval rating. It now sits at 42%. Again, go back to our last poll. Look at this. He was in all-time low for him territory last time around. Now up back over 40%. This is the highest Biden's job approval has been in our poll since last spring. So again, these are encouraging signs for Joe Biden, although broader picture here, this 42% approval rating, history says, probably by itself not enough. He's probably going to need more.
So looking at these numbers, it seems like, yeah, Biden is getting a little bit of a bump, but I think it's more of a consolidation. People who were on the fence are now trickling towards Biden, and this hasn't quite yet happened for Donald Trump, but we'll see. I don't know who actually would be looking around right now and saying, yeah, the state of the world is better, the economy is better, the border is better, and now all of a sudden switching over to Joe Biden. So I think this is a lot of undecideds kind of making up their mind and voting blue no matter who. Will Donald Donald Trump get the same effect? Possibly. We'll have to see in the future. But also, I don't know if having Joe Biden out on the campaign trail is going to be a net positive. He is a gaffe machine, and the more people see him, the more they're going to recognize how weak and ineffectual he actually is.
Besides, I used to drive an 18-wheeler. You know what I did? And one of the things that, for me, I got involved when I was a kid in electoral politics out of the civil rights movement. Look, a couple things I want to say. One of the things that earlier today I spoke about, I was up in Washington. And
now, at his State of the Union address, he did come out and seem robust, I suppose is a decent word for that. But he wasn't exactly hopeful about America. He was basically very, very angry, but they had him kicked up on enough meds that he actually was able to be coherent for a certain amount of time.
This in some context here. These are other recent presidents at this point in their reelection campaigns. Where were their approval ratings? Again, you see Biden's 42%. One thing that jumps out, they were all higher than Joe Biden. The other thing, the two presidents on this list who did not win reelection, of course, Donald Trump 4 years ago, he was at 46%. And back in 1992, George H.W. Bush, he was at 43%. Biden below both of those. The last time Biden's been at this level, 46%. You got to go back to the start of 2023. The last time he was higher than that, you got to go back to the summer of 2021, his first year as president. So Biden has some work to do on that front. And also, troubling for the Biden campaign, the erosion of public confidence on a number of critical fronts. We asked voters in this poll about a number of leadership characteristics here. Which candidate would be better? There are two, only two where Biden has the edge over Trump. Abortion. We've talked about this one, seen this for a long time here.
That's a big one.
It is, certainly is. That's the biggest Biden advantage in this poll. And then bringing the country together. Biden, you see, performing better than Trump. But I think the headline here is you add those two numbers together, you're not even close to 100. That means a lot of voters think neither candidate is better on that. And then on every other front here, we talk about the erosion for Biden, and now you start to see it. Look at these numbers. Trump advantages on all of these traits.
And I stop here because competent and effective, that was President Biden's, the crux of his campaign pitch back in 2020.
And we actually polled this question in 2020, and it was basically the exact opposite. It was Biden with about a 10-point advantage over Trump. And again, same with handling a crisis. Biden had the edge over Trump. And how about this? It's the former president, the current president. We don't really see matchups like this. Well, now we can measure it. Who has the strong record as president? And again, Trump outpacing Biden on that front. And again, you got to mention this one, too. Necessary mental and physical health. We asked this 4 years ago. It was a wash. It's now a clear liability for Joe Biden.
Yes, Joe Biden's numbers are not looking good. They're actually lower than Donald Trump's were back in 2020. And of course, Donald Trump lost the election. And traditionally, of course, this is true. When presidents get below that 45% mark, who are incumbents, they tend to have trouble being re-elected. But also, look at those key issues that Joe Biden was ahead on. Abortion, all right, and bringing the country together. Guess what are the biggest issues? Not those two. Donald Trump, of course, is leading on everything that really matters to the American people. And this begs back to the question of why are Joe Biden's poll numbers improving? Because clearly, by all of the really important metrics, Donald Trump is in fact ahead. So like I said, I think it's a consolidation for Joe Biden, not necessarily gaining new support. People just finally making up their mind, getting off the fence and saying, okay, let's go for it.
Well, Trump and his campaign are hoping a third-party candidate might give them a little bit of a boost, but our poll shows it's a little bit murkier than that.
That's the thing, because, again, we show a 46-44 race here for Donald Trump. Again, all those liabilities for Biden, Trump only ahead, too. What the Trump folks have been hoping is RFK, third-party candidates, they gobble up some votes, and Trump doesn't need to get to 50%. Yeah. But look what happens when we add RFK's name to the mix. Suddenly, we have a new leader. Joe Biden, 39%, Donald Trump, 37%. There's Kennedy getting 13%. In other words, we're seeing by a better than 2-to-1 margin, it's Trump voters who are flipping over to Kennedy in this scenario, not Biden voters. You see it right here. 15% of Trump voters, when we add RFK's name to the mix, they go to RFK, only 7% of Biden voters.
So the key takeaway here, of course, to me is, yes, Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden in the NBC poll. Is the race tightening? Yes, it is. Now, when you throw in Robert F. Kennedy, this looks to be like a wrench in the works. However, this is a recent development. This has has not been what's happening in all of the other polls leading up to this one. Kennedy has been taking away more from Joe Biden. So do I believe this? Not necessarily. However, Kennedy has been on the warpath. He has been saying the right things, but you have to realize he's still a leftist. He's still a gun grabber. He's still a green weenie, right? He's going to be out there saying all the right things about, say, COVID vaccines, Israel, Ukraine, all of these big key issues. But you have to understand he is still at heart a Democrat, and he will govern as one. And I think as more people see it, if in fact you believe these numbers, they're going to go away from Robert F. Kennedy.
One final note, Kristen, as well, is this. It's the question of enthusiasm. I thought this really jumped out here. The most engaged voters, those who voted in 2020, voted in the midterm elections, those folks are voting for Biden by 9 points. Where Trump's strength is, why he leads Biden, it's voters who don't typically turn out in many elections. Didn't vote in 20, didn't vote in 2022. They are with Trump by more than 20 points.
There you have it. This is why Donald Trump is leading. So people who aren't normally voters, even they are coming out and saying, yeah, Joe Biden's economy, Joe Biden's America, Joe Biden's world leadership is not on par with Donald Trump. So who do we prefer? Who are we going to go, hopefully, to for the first time with these brand new voters, people who did not vote? If we can convince them to come out in droves, that would be excellent news for Donald Trump. Now, when we're looking at other polls, here we have a general election Meredith College poll. You can see that, yes, Donald Trump is ahead with Biden trailing, even with RFK in the mix. Now, of course, that's not true for every poll, because over here we can see from NPR Marist that Biden's actually leading Trump by 3 points. And then you can see over here at Morning Consult, Biden is up on Trump by 1 point. All right. So you do have other polls showing this difference. But the thing that really matters, of course, is the Electoral College, where Trump is still ahead in those swing states, give or take Wisconsin.
Well, President Biden appears to be losing steam in the polls. Former President Trump has a significant lead over Biden in 6 of the 7 key battleground states.
So I'm still confident that Donald Trump can win. He's got the underlying support. I do believe he has momentum going into this. And of course, Joe Biden is a gaffe machine, and nobody seems to like what he's doing to America. So as usual, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and stay safe out there, people, because they're coming after you.